Thanks very much for watching. Hollie Hughes, Senator in Canberra, and Linda Scott, who is running to be the Lord Mayor of Sydney, Labor's choice, hence why she's resplendent in red, and I'm in support of her. There you go. She, of course, but before, we all know how much she cares about local council. But I hear that you are in hock to the Chinese, because the claims being made in the newspapers today, and I don't know why they would suddenly appear in the newspaper when you seem the most obvious challenger to the current Lord Mayor in Clover Moore, is that you have a mysterious Chinese loan. Do tell, Councillor, about your connections to China, please.
Look, it's never dull, isn't it? And the Australian would love to have you believe that that was the case. But unfortunately, it's much more straightforward than that. So, yes, it is the case that in the last local government election, which was now 5 years ago, our campaign undertook a loan. It's been independently audited, disclosed transparently and in accordance with the law and on the public record for many, many years. This is, of course, now a story in the lead up to an election for reasons that I'll leave others to comment on. But this has literally been on our public disclosures, which are easily searchable on the internet for many, many years. It's also the case that it's a really common practice for election campaigns of all forms to have loans. We know, for example, that the state member in my area, Alex Greenwich, an independent, has been a person who has also disclosed loans on his electoral returns too. This is a common practice for major parties, for independents and many groups. Our loans were disclosed transparently. They've all been completely repaid. We're fundraising now in the hope that we don't have to have any loans so that we can continue to rely on the donations and support of a large number of donors who donate typically really small amounts, and we'll run a really grassroots campaign focused on the positive aspects of the future.
So the breaking news is that a loan that has been repaid, that has been publicly known for years, is in the paper today.
And look, this is not the first time that I've been...
Not whacking the journos, but we all know the behind the scenes.
You know, and I respect that journalists need to cover these stories. You know Paul Murray. I'm always happy to answer questions about these things, but it's the second time I've been asked about this by journalists. We responded to the first journalist. They chose not to cover it. So clearly, unfortunately, there is someone out there who's pushing a story to trying to get it covered about us. It's an election campaign.
There you go. Well, good luck in it. Now, Hollie, Labor might be thinking about a new tax to be able to help pay for changes when it comes to aged care right now. Now, I don't know that you'll be able to run the Labor equals taxes line as concerned if the money's going to be specifically about aged care, but it is interesting that you've been able to find, the federal government's been able to find extra money for aged care. You were able to do it without a levy, without a new tax, but Labor might end up putting in a new tax to do it.
But let's be honest, Paul, this isn't a levy, this is a new tax. A levy is something that goes on temporarily in addressing a particular issue. This isn't a levy, this is a new tax, and Labor's never seen a new tax that they don't like. We should never forget that under Shorten and Jim Chalmers, there was over $380 billion of new taxes taken to the last federal election. So I think as we get closer to this federal election, we'll continue to see the Labor Party looking for ways to take more of Australians' money away from them. At the moment, they can't decide if they want to support the last tranche of tax cuts or not. Never, ever let them stand in the way of taking money off an Australian taxpayer. And they don't like leaving money that Australians earn in their own pockets. They certainly don't think Australians know how to spend their own money best. And I guess that's one of the biggest points of differentiation when it comes to our party and theirs. We would much prefer to see Australians keep more of what they earn, because we actually believe they can spend it better to ensure we see economic growth rather than continuing to tax and spend their way out of it.
Linda, do people have a different attitude if it's a tax for a good cause?
Well, look, it's a matter for the Federal Labor Party and their leader, Anthony, about what they're going to announce in the lead up to election. My understanding is they haven't announced policies about this yet, so it's all just speculation at the moment. Nevertheless, I don't think Australians will continue to accept that our aged care standards continue in some places to be as problematic as they are. I was very lucky when my lovely father moved into aged care. He moved into a fantastic place here in Sydney, but others have not been so lucky. And it's really important that we have appropriate ratios of staff to people who are living in these places. And we have seen chronic failures in the system. We have seen people living in conditions that are absolutely unacceptable, and unless the federal government puts forward a proper answer for how the sector is going to be properly funded, then it is going to be a contest of ideas between the Labor Party, who has a vision for this, and the government, who won't fund it properly.
But didn't we see, Senator, in that federal budget, a huge amount of money, more money than it's ever been spent before, yet there are still, I mean, this is the thing. People's expectations, understandably, of aged care is that we all want the best for the people that we love, because one day it will end up being ourselves. But obviously, there can always be more money to be spent.
Look, and all of the recommendations that have been considered after the Aged Care Royal Commission, we're not going to see, unfortunately, changes happen overnight, but the Morrison government is focused on ensuring the sustainability of the aged care sector, ensuring that it's boosted, particularly with those staff ratios. We do need to keep those in mind. I mean, we saw today in estimates the Labor Party out there screeching around people being able to work in 2 sites or multiple sites of aged care homes. Now, that's important. A lot of people do that because aged care homes want to make sure if someone is sick or away that they can bolster their staff levels. Now, that was removed. The ban on working on multiple sites was removed in November and is now driven by hotspots. But Labor today was somehow crying out for us to return to workers being able to work in one single aged care home. I understand why we would need to make moves around it when it comes to COVID and hotspots that are being declared. But to have some blanket ban across the country on people working in multiple aged care homes, particularly when we're looking at casual workforce and workforce that needs to fill gaps in service levels when they occur, to ensure that those in aged care receive the best possible care at the time that it's required, we need to actually have sensible discussions and not some of the absolutely outrageous and pathetic behaviour we saw in estimates today.
Now, I know we can go back and forth, very important, but I've got to also ask about a couple of other things that are equally, well, nothing as important as aged care, but still some other stuff that's around. The size of the public service in Victoria has grown and grown exponentially in the past few years. Now, it grew under the Baillieu government and it has, of course, exploded under the Andrews government. Here's some comparisons for you. 2013 to 2014, the cost of the average cost to Victorians of the public sector was $3,000 and a bit. Now it's $5,500. The total amount that they spend on public servants in Victoria, $20.7 billion a few years ago, now $35 billion. Let's put this down into brass tacks, though, Linda. I don't know, you can't speak about any one specific council. But Melbourne City Council, their entire wages bill is $180 million. Perfect example is that local council area, right? You're across it, you understand it. How the heck do wages get to that level where you're running $180 million payroll?
Well, look, councils in New South Wales employ 55,000 people. We employ hundreds of thousands across the nation. And frankly, we're doing all we can to make sure that we're employing people and stimulating our local economies to grow back jobs, not just in local governments, but in our local areas, because this is what we need to do to recover from the economic slump that COVID has seen us in. So jobs growth is good. We also have really record low wage growth, and this is not just in local government, it's across our sector. Hollie was just actually explaining how the problem has an impact on places like aged care, where people do need to work in 2 places to afford to live and stretch themselves beyond what is reasonable, and indeed we've seen during COVID beyond what is actually useful for public health purposes in a pandemic because of low wage growth. So we do have a really significant problem. Now, we all also have a lot of concern about the skills gap and about the need for training and education, but this is not something that we can easily address by just continuing to drive down wages. What we need to see is proper, fair wage growth. We need to see proper sharing of profits so that we don't just have huge gains for small numbers of people, but we have fair wage growth so that people can work safely. And look, I appreciate the comments about public servants, and I know that, people always look closely at these figures, but the reality is we're talking about nurses, we're talking about ambulance officers, we're often talking about childcare workers, we're talking about frontline staff that have been working incredibly hard during a pandemic. I don't think people are going to begrudge these kinds of categories of employees fair pay rises after the year that we've just had. That seems entirely reasonable to me.
Yeah, but also, we also know too, Hollie, that the half-empty version of what classifies as a public servant is the diversity officer, or the person who was turning up at those schools in Melbourne telling all boys to stand up and apologise for what's between their legs. Like, I mean, look, I get it. Can you have the same size public service forever? No, because population grows, demands on government. I get that, right? But I just don't believe that the need for the number of people to be paid by the state in Victoria has gone from $20 to $35 billion in less than 10 years.
Look, it's extraordinary. And when you think of the damage that a lot of these bureaucrats are currently inflicting on small business owners in Victoria, I mean, they should hang their head in shame. But we can't have Victoria just do this on its own. Apparently, Premier Palaszczuk, as she shut down businesses across her state, now deserves a bit of a pay rise as well as all of her MPs, despite pledges that there would be a freeze on their remuneration. So, we're seeing this across the board. Labor governments liking to pat themselves on the back, boost their wages where they can, all at the time while they're cutting and destroying small businesses in their states through these knee-jerk reactions. I mean, we had another case tonight in New South Wales. But pretty much in Sydney, everyone's relaxed because we know we're not going to have Gladys go shut down our entire state overnight. Businesses aren't in a big tiz because they're going to have to lock down for 7 days as some sort of circuit breaker that we know is going to be extended. I'd prefer to see them spend money on getting decent quarantine systems, decent QR codes, actually utilising some of the stuff that's happening in New South Wales so that their states could start to prosper again and stop worrying about lining their own pockets in the public service and in those state parliaments.
Well, also worth noting here too, and again, I know that the vast majority of public servants are the absolute, frontline people, right? I just had a look on the City of Melbourne's website. They want to pay a media manager to be part of their strategic communications $127,000. That's what part of their $180 million budget is. So, fair income. Anyway.
Well, I can tell you they're going to earn more money there if they work for a backbench senator, because the MOPS agreement does not pay our media advisors anywhere that amount of money. Considering I'm looking for a new one, I probably shouldn't say that. They'll go and apply for the job in Victoria.
There you go.
Well, we'd love to, but in federal government, we try and keep our members of parliament staff at some sort of level of pay that really society can stomach. So, we don't have that same sort of leeway to just keep whacking up public servants' salaries under the guise of council. I mean, you want to tell me working as a media advisor in a council equates and has the same demands as working for a federal member of parliament? Probably not. But you're going to earn a hell of a lot of money in Melbourne City Council. Mind you, you will be locked down every couple of weeks, so there's to and fro. You've probably got to get paid a bit of danger money there.
All right. You're typing up Nicholas Reese's thoughts. Anyway, $127,000. How did I not notice that earlier in the day when we had a chance to talk to him? All right, ladies, do appreciate it. Thank you very much to you, Linda, to you, Senator. We'll talk to you again very soon. And also, our mate Jacinta Price, there's a chance that she is going to be running for the Senate. We'll explain that and, obviously throw our full support behind her in a moment or two's time, as well as some crazy ideas around what